Hi Rangers! Today we're going to be going over graphing systems of inequalities. So we're going to do this by breaking it down into three separate parts. So first part, for example 1, it says, can you identify which equation goes with each line? So looking at this first line right here, okay, I notice that it has an inequality sign with no line, which means this should have a dotted or dashed line, which means it's going with this line right here. Okay, the second one has a line underneath, which means it should have a solid line. And it's going to be going with this line right here. Okay, so it's important to know which line goes with which equation. Now that we know that, we're going to use the equations and add the correct shading. So as a reminder, when it opens towards the y, doesn't matter the sign, if it has a line or no line, you're going to shade above. When it opens away from the y, you shade below. Okay, so I'm starting with this first inequality. It's opening away from the y, so we're shading below. Okay, and that was with the dotted line. So I find my dotted line, I find the y-intercept, I go down, and this area is the area that's going to be shaded. Okay, I'm just focusing on it in relation to the dotted or dashed line. Then I go to my second equation. Okay, it's opening towards the y, which means it's going to be above. So I find that line, which is the solid line, and I'm going to shade above. So I find the y-intercept, I go up, so that's going to be this area right here. Okay, so what we are looking for is this overlapping shaded area right here that I'm going to highlight in yellow. This is the area that is the solution set. Okay, that is what we're looking for. Part C says, is the point 0, 0 a solution to the system of inequalities? Well, if we look, 0, 0 is right here. It falls in that overlapping shading area. So yes, it is a solution to the system of inequalities. Okay, moving on to example number 2. Okay, can you identify which equation goes with each line? Yes, we can. This top equation is going to go with the dotted or dashed line. Okay, so that's this one right here. This bottom equation is going to go with the solid line. So we're going to focus on our shading now. For this first one right here, since it opens towards the y, that means we're going to shade above. So I'm going to find the dotted line and shade above. So I find my y-intercept, I go up. So this area right here is above the dotted line. Okay. Then I look at my second equation. It's opening away from it, which means we're going to shade below. So I'm going to find the solid line and shade below. So the solid line's right here. I find my y-intercept, I go down. So that's this area right here. What we are looking for is the overlapping shading, which is this area that I am now highlighting in yellow. Okay, that is the overlapping area, which means any point that falls in this yellow area is in the solution set. So, is 0, 0 a solution to the system? Well, I plot my point 0, 0. It falls in that overlapping area, so yes, it is. Okay, moving on to example number 3, making it a little more difficult. Okay, so can you identify which equation goes with each line? Well, this time we can't just determine it based on the inequality sign because both of our lines are solid. So what we have to be able to do is either 1, no slope intercept form, or 2, be able to graph and match it. So what I'm going to do to help us is I am going to graph this part of this first equation because it's already solved for y. If I graph it, I can see what it looks like and where it should be going through on my y-axis, so I am able to determine which line it goes with. Okay, so I am going to go to my calculator, get a new document, and I'm going to add a new graph. Okay, I am going to graph that line. So 3/2 x minus 1. I graph it. I see that it's going through, -1. If I'm not sure, I can always go to menu 5-1, trace it, and I see clearly that that's my y-intercept at -1. So I know this line right here that's going through -1 is that top equation. So this line right here is the equation okay, which means this is the second equation. So I'm just going to put number 2 so I don't have to write it all out. So this is number 2 right here. I'll label this number 1. Go ahead and erase this and label it number 1. Okay, so now that we know that, we can focus on our shading. So if I look right here, this tells me I need to shade above. So I'm going to find my line number 1. I'm going to go up. So this is the area that is shaded above. Then I look at my equation number 2. This one is not solved for y, but if you can see this right here, it tells me that I will have to divide by a negative when I solve for y, and that my inequality sign will flip. And since my inequality sign will flip, this means I'm going to shade below. So I'm going to find line number 2. I'm going to shade below. What we are looking for again is that overlapping area. So this is the area right here. I'm highlighting it in yellow to make it stand out a little more. Now we need to see if the point 0, -5 is in the solution set. So 0, -5 is right here. It is not in that yellow area, so no, it is not a solution. It works for line number 2, but it does not work for line number 1, so it is not a solution. Again, you could always plug in the point for x and y into both equations like we did yesterday. Okay, looking at the back side or the second page. Okay, can you identify which line goes with each one? Again, we can't eliminate it just based on the inequality sign. So this one we're going to have to do a little bit of math. So we're actually going to have to practice solving for y. So I'm going to focus on solving just this first equation for y, and that can help me identify which equation goes with each one. So I'm going to rewrite it. Okay, so I'm going to start by solving. So I'm going to draw my line through my inequality sign. I subtract 4x from both sides. That cancels out. I get 3y is greater than negative 9 minus 4x. I divide both sides by 3. I get y is greater than negative 3 minus 4/3 x. Okay, so we can use that and graph it so we can identify. So I'm going to start with a new graph. So I'm going to discard my changes, get a new graph. Go ahead and put my notes page on top because I have a bad memory. So we have negative 3 minus 4/3 x. I graph it. I see that it's going through negative 3. If you're not sure, you can always go menu 5-1. You see right there, it is at negative 3. So when I go back to my notes, back to my notes, we want the one that is going through negative 3. That's this line right here. So this would be number 1. And this would be number 2. So just by solving one of the equations, we were able to identify which line went with each. Okay, now based on that, we see that this one is opening towards the y. We could also see by this that we would not be having to flip the sign. So that means that we shade above. So for line number 1, I find my y-intercept, I go up, I shade that area that is above. For number 2, I'm not going to worry about solving it because I do know, based on looking at that negative sign, that I'm going to have to flip the inequality sign. And it's going to be opening away, which means we're going to shade below for line number 2. So on line number 2, I find my y-intercept. I go down. I'm shading below that area. What we are looking for, and the goal of this whole lesson, is that you can find this overlapping area right here that I'm highlighting in yellow so you can see a little better. Okay, that is our solution set. So this one wants to know, is the point 0, -5 in the solution set? Well, 0, -5 is down here. It works for one line, but not for both, so no, it's not. Okay, moving on to some star-like questions. Okay, which graph shows the solution to the system of inequalities? So the big part is knowing that we need one solid line, one dotted line. It looks like based on that, I can eliminate answer choice D because they are both solid, which means it does not work. Okay. Now, if I can identify which line goes with which, it might help me get my answer. So I am going to go ahead and graph this one right here so I can see which line is it going to be. So I have negative, I'm going to get my new graph. I have x minus 3, I believe it was. Yes, x minus 3, I press enter. So that has a positive slope and it's going through -3 on the y-axis. So when I switch over, my solid line should be going positive, which means that I can eliminate answer choice B because it does not have the correct solid line. So now I have to be able to determine out of the two which would be the correct shading. So looking at my first graph or my first line, it is opening away from the y, which means we're shading below on the solid line. Well, my solid line, I'm going to find my y-intercept. I go down. So this is the area that is below. On my dotted line, I want to be able to shade below as well. So my dotted line, the below area, would be this mess right here. Okay, and that means that we want this to be the overlapping area. Now, I made it hard to see on ours, so I'm going to erase what I have. But if we look at answer choice C, notice that it has all of this in common, which means that can't be our answer because that's not what we want. Okay, we only want, erase my mess, there we go. Okay, you can see this is the darker area for A, and that's what we want the solution to be. So A is our answer. Okay, looking at number 6, the last example of this video. Go ahead and pause it and try, see if you can figure it out for yourself. Okay, so hopefully you give it a try. Based on looking at my inequality signs right here, it allows me to eliminate F and G because they have the wrong types of line. Okay, then I'm looking at it and I just need to figure out which line is which. So I'm going to go ahead and focus on this one because it is the one that's already solved for Y. I'm just going to do it by looking at it this time. I know that my y-intercept is -2, which means this is that line right here. Okay, so now we can focus on the shading of the line. So for this bottom line, I'm going to start with the bottom one this time because it's already solved for Y. I am going to shade below. So the below area is down here. Below area is down here. Okay. For the second line, I see that there's a negative in front of the Y, which means the Y would end up, or the inequality sign would end up flipping, and I'm going to shade below for that as well. So below for the second line would look like this. Let me do in a different direction. Look like this. There we go. Okay, so which graph is showing that the overlapping area is darker? Well, if I erase it, okay, we wanted this area right here that was overlapping, so it would be answer choice H. So if you have any questions, please make sure you reach out to your teacher and have a